right now go on tour. And then when we come back, I think we're gonna start writing new song, new stuff. We are Les Shirley. It's a rock power trio, basically all female. So it's three good friends that decided to just start a kick-ass band for fun at first, and then it became more serious over time. And we just love to have fun, honestly. And obviously, the connection with the public is there. I think it's two different things. Like you would love listening to our music, but I think that seeing us live is a whole different thing. We bring such energy to the stage. The origins of Les Shirley, I think, came from when me and the drummer Lisandre, we had another band when we were younger, like early 20s, and that band was like an electro pop act. It was very different from Les Shirley. And when this project came to an end in 2018, we still felt like we wanted to play together, and we still felt like we had something to say. So we started this band as, for pure fun at first. And Sarah Dion, which is the bass player in Les Shirley, she's actually a really, really good drummer. So we had two drummers and a guitar player. So we were like, oh, okay, that's not working. So Sarah is like, yeah, I'm going to buy a bass, whatever. So she bought a bass and we just started playing. And turns out that she's an amazing bass player now. We just started for fun. And then we booked ourselves like 4 or 5 shows, I think, in Quebec, in the areas, in Montreal. And then when we saw the crowd response, we were like, okay, no, there's genuinely something there. Like the crowd was really digging the music and the vibe and the whole energy. From there, we just, decided to make it more serious and to go and release the first EP. And then we have 2 albums out now. We've known each other for 10 years over here, and we always had different projects. But when we decided in 2019 to come together and write some music that was definitely inspired by our teenager years, but also, with like a very actual sound. We kind of make the music and the sound that we would have loved to hear as a angsty teenager. There was not many girl bands around when I was a teenager. So like there was always, a front woman, all male band. So I think that's for us, it's a great breakthrough to see so many women taking over the stage today. And it's important for us too. There was always women around, but I feel like something mainstream or something more accessible, like an all female group. In the 80s, there was some. I mean, I started to play guitar when I was like 14 in the second year of high school. And I was lucky enough to find some friends that wanted to start a band with me. So we were a 4-piece band. The name was Black Mamba because the Kill Bill movies were kind of a big thing back then. And the name of the main character, like our code name, was Black Mamba. So we thought it was cool to get that name as well. And we just started playing like locally shows in the school as well, like some, like talent shows and stuff. So it was a big music scene in Quebec City. There was always shows, like more smaller venues, bigger venues. So I had a chance to be in that city who really fed my music desire. Part of the process as a band to like create when you're just, starting to create your sound and you're mixing up influence together and you're just like getting out there and just trying stuff. So looking back on this EP, really, really satisfied because it also brought us many good things. We signed into a label with that EP. We also won a couple of prizes over here in Quebec. We won in 2019 Best New Artist and also Best Rock EP with that. So that's really what kickstart the whole band. And then the first album was definitely something that we are proud of. We released that in the pandemic, so we didn't know what was going to be the outcome. Like, was people going to be, fed up with new music, not receptive? So we released that, but turns out that people were actually craving new music and craving this kind of nostalgic sound with the first album. We drove down the memory lane a bit more. Second album is a bit more personal and a bit more like a different sound. But the first one was definitely nostalgical. We were really surprised at the reception, both by the public and the media, even all around the world. Like we had interest in Germany. That's why we definitely started touring. So this album brought us many, many good things. We released it and then it just started to have like a media kind of frenzy over here over the album. Like a bunch of like very big bloggers and a bunch of like famous YouTubers and stuff started just like relaying the album and just wearing the merch, buying the merch. So that really, really brought people to the show. And also this big commercial radio station over here in Montreal, Chaume FM, started playing like massively the first single, Fuck It, I'm in Love. So that really, really, really brought attention to the band and it really kickstarted the machine, like the whole thing. It's been kind of crazy over here, honestly, like ever since the release of the second album as well. We have been doing a lot of appearances on the national TV. We did the final number for The Voice Quebec. And then this summer, I think we played over 20 shows over here, touring the whole of Quebec. We opened for the Festival d'été de Québec, which is one of the biggest festivals over here, on the main stage. So 80,000 people were there. And then the Foo Fighters just called, I mean, the management of the band called me on my phone to tell me that the band were interested in us opening for them and that they watched the YouTube videos and they loved the music. And I was like, what the hell is this? So then there was another media frenzy over that for sure. Like it was a crazy time. And people think that this doesn't happen. If like a band this big listen to your music and love it, it's like, okay, well, then we must be doing something right. I felt purposeless for like months. I was like depressed. I was like, what am I doing? You know, there's no shows, there's no events anymore, there's nothing. So I think that Forever Is Now was more of a optimistic album because we wrote that pre-pandemic and we released it during the pandemic. But then More Is More was written during the pandemic and released after. So it was more of a introspective, kind of like a voyage. It's kind of like a ups and down album. It's really like reflecting what went on into my own head. Like it's a mix of like ups and downs, like depression and like manic states of like, yeah, let's do something and get out of here, travel. You know, those were times for me that I could escape and write. So a lot of music was written during that time. And I think that we just decided that, you know, we have enough to go ahead and release something else. And I felt like also in 2023, the reality of life is that when you release an album, the lifespan is much shorter than it used to be. So after 2 years of the other album, there was not much chance that when the festival season was coming around, we would have shows because that album was considered old. How we recorded it, it was, we like to do at first like really good demos. We will incorporate in our demos everything that we want to go in the studio. Like all the vibes is there, all the instrument parts for the most parts are there. All the ideas are laid out on the demos. When we get into the studio, we know exactly where we're going. So we went into the studio for 3 weeks, a whole 3 weeks, and maybe a little bit more for the vocal sessions after that. And we had like a couple days to set up. And I just remember the first day we got there, we wrote a new song. Like we wrote Nothing Compares, that is on the album now. And we just wrote it the first day of the studio. So that's also a possibility that we love to writing stuff in the studio as well. If we have ideas, if we have something that comes across as good. I mean, 3 weeks in the studio with the producer, our co-producer, Marie-Pierre Arthur, and our good friend Ryan as well, Battistuzzi. So the five of us for 3 weeks. This album was wrote in a total different mindset. The first EP and the first album were written more like in a live situation. We were like jamming together, the three of us, and playing it live. So we really created them as a power trio. But this album, we really created it on Ableton Live. We didn't think in terms of like playing them live in terms of a power trio. We really like expanded and we wanted to explore more. So when was the time now to actually play them? When we got to play them live, we were really confident because we played them over and over and over. And the reaction was really good. Instantly, I felt like, yeah, people did listen to the album. Some people knew the lyrics over here. So it was really interesting to connect with the public this way. I just found this photographer online and she's super young. Her name is Stephanie Dinsdale. I was like, oh, I really love like her visuals and her color palettes and like all of that. And we just reached out to her, and she's also queer. And for me, it was important to hire a queer woman. So we hired her, and we didn't know what we were going to do. We just had the idea of the closed up kind of fisheye kind of vision. It's a cover by, I think it's Blur, that is kind of the same aesthetic. That album really inspired me to make that cover art for sure. It's Time was our first single on the album, and it's really like a girl power anthem, kind of a wake-up call for the patriarchy. It's like, hey, we see you, now it's time for your wake-up call, now it's time to change the whole mentality, now it's time to expose the wrongdoings of usually men in power. I would say it was also inspired by the whole Me Too wave over here, and especially much closer to me, even in my own circle of people that I know of the music business in Quebec. It really like heads rolled, everybody that was being called out. So I was like, okay, this is enough. Like we see you, like we see who you are. So now it's time to stop. We came into the studio and we just reworked it. So that and Nothing Compares are the two tracks that we just we wrote in the studio. Right now, go on tour. And then when we come back, I think we're gonna start writing new song, new stuff. So 2024, definitely a new or two single, one or two. The plan is definitely to continue working the European market as much as possible. So we want to go back to France. I think the next tour will be maybe in April of 2024 or in October of 2024. Touring is definitely one of the main goals for now. We chose to sing in English, and sometimes it's a bit controversial over here because people are really protective of the language, which I understand totally. But for us, it was an artistic choice, and also just drawing from our influences. We all listen to more Anglophone music. And it's also a bigger market. If you sing in English, you can access places like Germany that we would have never gone if we were singing in French. So that's interesting. Yeah.